Oh, it's finally working. How are you guys doing? Good, good. Energy, something in the room? Great. Okay, so this is very exciting. Like right before this panel, people were talking about why blockchain was invented. It was all about privacy. It was all about scalability on that privacy, both institutional and retail. And let's take that topic forward. I'm very excited. We have Howard Wu, founder of Aleo. And then we have Rich Widmann, who is heading crypto strategies at Google, which I'm very excited about because it only took you 10 years. So with that, let's start. So first thing, actually, I'll start with you, Rich. For a $1 trillion company, global company like Google, which has been questioned by a lot of policymakers about privacy, what does privacy means to you?
Yeah, so I think that when we talk about privacy, right, there's sort of this idea of proportionality, right? So for users, there's the user idea of privacy. And we've made statements about this earlier, like generally speaking, everyone who wants to interact with a third-party service is going to be responsible for giving up some of their data. And the call to action or the challenge for people building in this space or people building any application is really to provide a service that users find valuable enough in order to make that transaction, right? And so we've been doing that on the search side and on the ad side for a long time. When we think about the crypto team and sort of the work that we do, it's obviously a very different role for Google to play. Because instead of us being sort of the center of a particular ecosystem that's controlled and run by us, in many ways, we're just an equal participant. And that's really the exciting opportunity of a lot of these public chains is that they are permissionless. And so just like you have, we always think of like the sort of the degen crypto builder who's able to build the next asset or launch a stable coin. In many ways, this is also, if we want this to scale globally, going to be an opportunity for large companies like Google to find the right way to participate. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about today is a little bit of that intersection of, and actually the last panel talked about it, which is, stablecoins appear to be a necessary condition for success or adoption for crypto generally, right? The ability to hold a non-volatile asset, to transact using a fiat-backed currency, but using the permissionless rails is absolutely critical for adoption, and we're seeing that bear out in the numbers. But as it's designed today in terms of like public, totally transparent ledgers, it's not ideal from a payments perspective. And Howard and I were actually just speaking earlier at a B2B payments event, and we asked the question about, how many people use Venmo, and then how many people set the privacy setting on their Venmo so that those payments aren't visible to everybody. And almost everybody's hand in the room went up, right? So every user, every individual wants some level of control over that privacy, just like an enterprise will. And so I think what I'm really excited about, I know we've talked about this, is the power of zero-knowledge proofs in this context actually offers a unique way to bring all of the best things about permissionless blockchains, but really level it up for the context that might be a little bit more suitable for large corporates like a Google. So.
Very interesting. You actually talked about 2-3 points which I want to come back and unpack, especially on the payments and privacy. But Howard, let's go here. So you have been one of the biggest voices about privacy and compliant in the space from very long time. Now you have Aleo, which is a layer 1 privacy and compliant chain. And how do you see blockchain which is built on the principles of privacy, really changing how the Web 2 worlds, the large Web 2 worlds of Google, Facebook, all these companies work? Where does Aleo come in?
Yeah, so for me, privacy, what ZK does and what the compliance here is for is really to unlock capabilities that aren't available or possible in crypto today. Take, for example, a simple user journey of buying coffee at your local coffee shop. If you were to pay in USDC today, the problem is that the barista would instantly learn your address. And if they know your address, now they know your wallet. And now they can see how much money you have, how much money you make, how much money you spend, how frequently you spend. This is a broken user journey. And so to me, this is about unlocking new capabilities and fixing some of the issues that are prevalent in Web3 today. With the technology like Aleo, we're bringing private smart contracts to market, and this is an opportunity to introduce a private version of stable coins, to offer private payments. This is going to unlock not just for the consumer, but also, as Rich talked about, for enterprises as well. So many companies want to do payroll. They want to do payroll with stablecoins. And the problem, of course, as you can imagine, is, well, if you use a stablecoin to make your payroll, you instantly leak how much everyone makes, and even more so, your employees, they can just see how much their colleagues make. And so, this is a broken user journey from my view, and fundamentally the goal really with this technology is to unlock these types of user journeys.
So let me follow up on that. How does Aleo come into the picture with this broken payment journey?
So Aleo is foundational infrastructure. It's a new L1 using zero-knowledge proofs. For those who are new to zero-knowledge proofs, it's a technology that allows you to convince another party that you know something or you did something without having to reveal to them all of that data. And so this is a very powerful primitive. We've seen it used in very, very small examples and early examples thus far. This is the first blockchain to come to market using ZK that has private smart contracts. And what we think is going to be a huge opportunity for developers is to use this technology to introduce configurable compliance into their applications. So I actually just gave a talk 2 days ago at ETH Global about primitives that developers can develop in their applications, specifically escrowable time locks, verifiable credentials, as well as policy engines. And the reason these things are so important, take verifiable credentials, for instance. Everyone understands the importance of authenticity and being authenticated, but one of the problems is you don't want to reveal all of your information on the blockchain. So if I want to attest that I'm over the age of 18, I don't want to make it permanent in this immutable blockchain, my date of birth. Or my name, or my nationality, right? But I need to convince other people and the application that, for example, I may be over 18, that I may be a US citizen, that I may not be on an OFAC sanctions list, for instance. And so having zero-knowledge proofs enables you to do that. And so we think about this as an opportunity to introduce compliance and confidentiality for crypto.
Very, very fascinating, because every time when I check in a hotel and I have to give my driving license and passports and all that information and my credit card, I'm like, well, if I would be behind with basic computer knowledge, I can hack this person in 2 seconds. So maybe not a good thing to say I need to use Aleo. So bringing that point here, Rich. So the question is, how does that work for Google? Like, not only from the institutional side, I'm a big GPay user, so how much privacy and compliance am I getting on that?
Yeah, well, it's a loaded question. As much as you set in your privacy settings is what I'll respond. But I think, look, where you're going to is where every crypto person goes in their mind, but we have a long way to go before we can even get to the scale of GPay, just frankly. But for us, I think there's 2 angles to this. So we don't have a long way to go for businesses to start adopting stablecoins. That's something that we have been pushing within our company for the last couple of quarters. And actually, as of Q4 last year, we're doing about tens of millions of dollars in stablecoin volume as payment for services. And so we're really actively playing around in this sandbox and exploring the crypto native primitives that exist and figuring out how much of this can we use right out of the box. How much of this has a delta between our current processes from a finance and an accounting standpoint? And then are there people working on solving some of these what we consider foundational challenges with respect to adoption? So I think that's the one part of it is, as we think about Google being a participant either as a recipient of stablecoins or perhaps a distributor of stablecoins, allowing people to receive payments, content creators, et cetera. What's our role there, and what technology do we need to make that more possible? The other side of it is really the developer side, and before we got on stage, Howard and I were just talking about this, which is how do we bring the power of ZK to more developers in a way that allows them to tap into the benefits of this privacy-preserving technology while still building useful applications like wallets and swapping dexes and things like that. And so the big part of this discussion that we've been having with the Aleo and the Wu-Provable team has been, well, what are the things that developers need, right? And so obviously the value here, we're talking about data, is the public data sets that we have. We have a public data set program. We've indexed over 25 blockchains. Some of that actually appears in Google Search now. But before it gets into search, there are thousands of developers who are looking to build on these protocols who want access to that data. And so that's an area that we've collaborated with the Wu-Provable team to make the data on the Wu-Provable network essentially available to developers and third parties. And then there's a whole host of things that we can think about that will make this easier when it comes to delegated proving, right? And that was the conversation we were just having. It's still very hard and frankly costly to run zero knowledge proofs, right? There's both a time and a latency concern, and then there's also a bit of a supply chain concern, which is if I build a wallet but I want to take advantage of ZK, who do I send the proofs to? And the folks at Aleo Provable, like they can't do all of it for everyone. Some of this has to be adopted and
One
and easy
day,
to,
yes, right?
I mean, it,
We would love the ecosystem to be decentralized. I would like
well,
that to
that's
be
exactly
clear too.
well, that's exactly the point, right? The point is that we don't just come up with great technology that large enterprises or large companies can use, but we come up with technologies that even individual developers can use, and that they're cost effective in sort of the open source ecosystem, right? So for us, I think there's those two big themes, right? The first theme is how do we think about solving a lot of the big challenges, and when it comes to the large companies, I think we are generally the most forward-thinking and open to reevaluating our position in the space and how we can leverage this technology to not just bring new markets or new services out to the world, but also how we can change Google at large internally. But then the other side is the developer ecosystem.
But I think I want to take this. You did tease into a big news, which I want to share in a minute, but I want to bring this to you, Howard. So that is all the payment system, but I'm sure Aleo is just not for that, right? That is one big piece of it, but I think identity, the supply chain proofs, and like a lot of things which came back here.
Absolutely. Aleo offers general programmable privacy, and so beyond just payments, there are several areas that we think are very interesting real-world use cases. For one, I touched a little bit on identity. There's an initiative that's being run by our foundation called ZPass. The goal there is to provide for this type of attestation where I can actually provide assurances that I'm over 18, that I'm not in a sanctioned list, that I'm a U.S. citizen, all these types of information available and widely kind of verified by other third parties. Another area is gaming. When it comes to gaming right now, if you're trying to build on Ethereum or Solana, one of the challenges is that there is no ability to have hidden game state. So if you want to build a game like chess, absolutely, you can do it on Ethereum. But the problem is if you want to build a game like Battleship, it gets really, really difficult. And maybe there's some cryptographers in the room and they'll say, well, maybe you could do like a commit and reveal scheme. Yes, you could. The problem there is it completely breaks the UI UX of the gameplay because it makes it incredibly slow, incredibly cumbersome. And what makes private smart contracts so interesting is that you now have information asymmetry. I can create a game like Battleship, hide the opponent's board, and play this game directly on chain without having to go through any cumbersome mathematics or cryptography or kind of convoluted schemes there. The last area I'll touch on, which I think is very interesting with private smart contracts and ZK, is that you now are giving developers far more expressivity, which is a huge advantage. So it opens the door to things like ZK and ML and also AI because of the fact that you now have this ability to run computations off-chain. In a blockchain like Ethereum, everyone is time sharing this 10-second block time. It's a lot like a mainframe is how I equate it to. Whereas when you're looking at ZK computations, you can now run computations off-chain that take a minute, that take an hour. It could even take a day, and then you submit it on-chain. There's no re-execution. The proof gets checked in under 10 milliseconds, and it's stored in as a state transition on-chain. And so that is a huge capability that opens the door to what developers can write in a smart contract, and we think that's a huge and powerful primitive for developers.
Wow, so that's like anything and everything. You can create the whole world starting from a person's identity, payments, shopping, like all the way down to everything.
That's the dream.
Yeah, you're probably going to know like the whole history of 10 generations of people are going to be on Aleo. Looks like that. Okay, so now before we go, I mean, there is a huge press release from Google and Aleo, like Google going into privacy and compliant with Aleo, and it is for Notes Validator, Google Cloud, a bunch of stuff. Very exciting.
Yeah, so I think it's one of those things that cuts across both themes. So, at the technology layer and at the developer layer, there are some things that we're doing using the machine sizes and shapes that we have at Google Cloud that are going to lead to performance improvements on the proving side. And if Howard wants to talk a little bit more about that, he can. And then the other part about it is that we're really focusing on is how do we start taking some of the things that we're learning by working actively on the chain and incorporating it into our own experimentation around stablecoin adoption within the company at large. And I think that's actually really the two parts of one whole, which is, yes, you need to be able to think about how do you increase adoption. Yes, you need to make it easier for people to build. Of course, there's an opportunity for us to actually start thinking about how do we make it easier, not just for the provable folks, but for anybody building in the ZK space to get access to that technology, essentially, democratize it. But then, in service of what? Yeah. And so that's, I think, the really powerful point here is that this is all really in service of our own exploration as a company in terms of whether or not we can take advantage of these technologies for privacy preservation around payments and things like that.
as a Google, when you're sitting and you have so many choices and so many people coming and building and telling you Zcash and ZK proof and like different type of ZK proofs, actually, why Aleo for you?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. One of the things that was really stood out to us about Aleo and Provable was the previous conversations around privacy and payments was really kind of a take it or leave it option. So if you use Zcash or Monero, it was really just like, it's always private. There are no smart contracts. I mean, it was I think at the time, very innovative, and it solved a problem, but it just solved like the first order question of privacy on chain. It really didn't go as far to think about like, okay, well, what does this look like if it's adopted broadly by large corporates? And by the way, that doesn't necessarily need to be the thought process of everyone who's building in this space, right? Not everything is designed for global adoption or for big corporates like Google to be able to use it. That's okay. But at the same time, what we loved about what Howard and the team were building there was they had thought about private smart contracts, which he had mentioned. That was something that we thought was innovative. And then the other part of it was on the developer side, they had just this. They had articulated a plan here where they were thinking about what I would consider to be like proportional or optional privacy. In other words, ways in which you can preserve payments and have them private, but also enabling things like compliance, where if you do need to see a payment as a third party who's doing this, and by the way, any corporate is going to need to be able to view who's paying them, that is an option that didn't previously exist in the ZK space before, and so it opens up.
That's very fascinating, actually. As an investor in the space, that's a very interesting point. That as Google with that level, with that scalability, you didn't think that option existed before Aleo.
I mean, no, and honestly, I think there were options that existed, but they didn't play nicely in terms of that optionality standpoint. So like I said, it was sort of take it or leave it. So you come and you accept these kind of privacy preserving methodologies, and there is no compromise. And like I said earlier, that's okay for certain use cases, but for a company, it's very difficult for us to
especially
to
for
do
payments,
that.
right?
Yeah, it's impossible.
And global
for payments.
clients with so many different countries, GDPR and everything.
Different rule sets, different requirements, and that's the other thing. Like people, obviously, Google interacts with users in all sorts of different jurisdictions, and so we have to tailor that approach.
This sounds too complicated. Aleo, why Google then?
A big part of the opportunity here is to accelerate ZK development and ZK adoption. And I think to what Rich is saying, we believe strongly in configurable compliance. We want developers to be able to comply with local laws and regulations where they are. And that's a natural conversation that comes up when you talk about private payments or private applications. And so, unless you have a smart contract system wedded to a privacy system, you're not going to be able to develop compliant solutions that are going to work for your specific retail market. And I think that is where Google recognizes that. We've been working on trying to develop confidential payment systems with them so that's an opportunity we can showcase to the world and make that widely available to kind of see this is kind of the standard of what can be done and really give developers an opportunity to plug in and play.
Wow, this is massive, guys. Like being in the space since 2015, companies like Google, Facebook, bunch of those multi-international, we have been talking to them, and it has never really came all the way fruition to where we are. Very quickly, with this announcement of partnerships, what does Aleo now looking forward with Google, what you are already doing, and what you want to get Google to do, which they are not thinking right now?
Well, so there's several things. For one,
good question. Now's your chance.
Yeah. I'm going to put you on the spot here, man. No, for one, Google Cloud will be running a validator on the Aleo network. We're very excited to announce that. Secondly, Google Cloud has integrated and indexed all of Aleo's blockchain data. So that is now available on the Google Cloud Web3 portal. You can now use it in BigQuery. We think this is going to be huge, not just for analytics, but also for new applications that developers want, and also features that they need, for example, like record scanning. And also lastly, we're exploring this, the confidential payment systems area. That's something that we think is very exciting. It's a very new area because people have not been able to articulate a good solution that is compliant and confidential. And so that's an area that we really want to push on together.
Can I add one more?
Of course.
Identity. For all my Gmails and all the emails I really want to delete, but I don't know where they are.
There's, it's interesting because there are people that are using Google single sign-on and ZK capabilities to allow people to access wallets now. And so that's, obviously the protocols are leading that. That's not us. But I do think that there are untapped or unexplored areas where you can take some of the Google properties, combining it with this technology to create a better user experience, and by the way, leverage some of the privacy preserving tech there. So
That's what I'm excited about. My identity, my GPay, my Gmails, and all the boyfriends I want to delete from
that's
there.
the
can
final
go there.
boss.
With that, thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much
Thank
for being
you.
here.